The smell of dirt and rotting potatoes had never been so comforting as it was in that moment when Caroline pressed her back against the earthen wall of the root cellar, listening to the heavy footsteps above her head as her husband stumbled through their small farmhouse looking for her. It was August of 1878 in the scrubland outside of Dodge City, Kansas, and the heat of the day still radiated through the wooden door she had pulled shut above her head, but she was shaking like it was the dead of winter. This was the third time this week that Jacob had come home from town with whiskey on his breath and rage in his eyes, and this time she had seen something darker in his expression that made her flee to the only place she could think to hide. She could hear him shouting her name, his words slurred and angry, punctuated by the sound of furniture being knocked over. Caroline wrapped her arms around herself, her thin cotton dress doing little to protect her from the rough wall behind her. She was 22 years old and had been married to Jacob for 4 years, ever since her father had arranged the match when she was barely 18. Back then, Jacob had seemed like a hard-working farmer with prospects, but the years had been hard on him, on both of them, and he had found solace in the bottle while she had found only loneliness and fear. The shouting grew louder, and then she heard the front door slam open. Jacob was outside now, still calling for her, his voice carrying across the flat Kansas prairie. Caroline held her breath, pressing herself further into the corner of the cellar, surrounded by sacks of last winter's turnips and jars of preserves she had put up in better times. She could feel her heart hammering against her ribs so hard she thought it might give her away. Then she heard something else. The sound of a horse approaching at a steady trot, and then a man's voice, calm and measured, speaking words she could not quite make out. Jacob's shouting stopped abruptly, replaced by a different tone, still belligerent but slightly more controlled. Caroline strained to hear what was being said, but the walls of the cellar muffled the conversation. She waited, every muscle in her body tense, wondering if she should stay hidden or if this newcomer might somehow make things worse. Minutes passed like hours. Then she heard footsteps approaching the cellar door, and her breath caught in her throat. But these footsteps were different, lighter and more purposeful than Jacob's drunken stumbling. The door above her head opened, and bright afternoon sunlight flooded in, momentarily blinding her. A silhouette appeared in the opening, and a voice she did not recognize spoke down to her. "Ma'am, you can come out now. He's sleeping it off in the barn." Caroline blinked, her eyes adjusting to the light, and she could make out the figure of a man crouched at the entrance to the cellar. He was wearing a wide-brimmed hat and had a bandana tied around his neck. His face was shadowed, but his voice was gentle, without threat. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Name's Cole Morgan. I was riding past and heard the commotion. Figured someone might need help." He extended a hand down toward her. "Come on up, ma'am. It's safe for now." Caroline hesitated, but something in his voice made her trust him. She reached up and took his hand, and he pulled her up out of the cellar with surprising ease. As she emerged into the fading sunlight, she got her first clear look at her rescuer. He was tall and lean, probably in his mid-20s, with dark hair that fell to his shoulders and eyes the color of strong coffee. His clothes were dusty from the trail, and he wore a gun belt slung low on his hips, but his expression was kind, concerned even. "Thank you," she managed, brushing dirt from her dress with trembling hands. "He gets like this sometimes. I just need to stay out of his way until he sobers up." Cole's jaw tightened, and she saw something flash in his eyes that might have been anger, though not directed at her. "How often is sometimes?" Caroline looked away, ashamed. "More and more lately. The farm's not doing well, and he blames me for it, I think. Says I'm not working hard enough, that I'm useless." She wrapped her arms around herself again, suddenly very aware that she was alone with a stranger. "I should not be telling you this. You have been kind, but I should go back inside and start supper." "Ma'am, respectfully, I do not think you should go anywhere near that man right now." Cole gestured toward the barn, where she could now see Jacob's form slumped against a hay bale, his head lolled to one side. I gave him some water and got him settled, but when he wakes up, he's likely to be in a foul mood. Do you have anywhere else you can go? Family nearby? Caroline shook her head. My parents are back in Missouri. They do not even know how bad things have gotten. Jacob would not let me write to them. She felt tears pricking at her eyes and blinked them back fiercely. She had cried enough over the past 4 years. I will be fine. This is my life, and I have to manage it. Cole was quiet for a moment, studying her with those dark eyes, and she had the unsettling feeling that he could see right through her brave words to the terror underneath. What if you did not have to manage it? He said finally. What if you could leave? The suggestion was so unexpected that Caroline actually laughed, though it came out bitter. Leave? And go where? I have no money, no prospects. A woman alone on the frontier does not last long. At least, here I have a roof over my head and food to eat most days. You also have a husband who chases you into a root cellar when he's drunk, Cole pointed out. His voice was still gentle, but there was steel underneath it. That's not living, ma'am. That's just surviving, and barely. Caroline felt something crack inside her chest, some wall she had built up over the years to keep herself going. What am I supposed to do? She whispered. I have nowhere to go, no one who would take me in. Cole was silent for a long moment, and she could see him thinking, weighing something in his mind. Then he said, I'm headed to Colorado. I have a small ranch there, nothing fancy, but it's mine. I could use someone who knows how to work hard, and you would be safe. I would make sure of it. Caroline stared at him, certain she had misheard. You are offering me work? You do not even know me. I know you are hiding in a root cellar from the man who's supposed to protect you, Cole said quietly. That tells me everything I need to know. Look, I'm not asking you to decide right this minute, but I will be camping about a mile west of here tonight, near the creek. If you want to leave, pack what you can carry and meet me there before dawn. If you do not come, I will ride on and you will never see me again. But at least you will have had the choice. With that, he touched the brim of his hat, climbed back onto his horse, and rode away, leaving Carolyn standing in the yard, her mind reeling. She watched him disappear into the distance, then turned to look at the farmhouse that had been her prison for 4 years. The paint was peeling, the porch sagged, and inside everything smelled of Jacob's whiskey and her own despair. In the barn, her husband snored, dead to the world. She thought about Cole's offer as she went inside and started preparing a simple supper of beans and cornbread. The idea of leaving was terrifying. She had never traveled anywhere alone, had never made a decision this big without someone telling her what to do. But the alternative was to stay here, to keep hiding in the cellar every time Jacob came home drunk, to keep walking on eggshells and hoping that this time he would not hit her. He had not hit her yet, but she had seen it coming in his eyes lately in the way his hands clenched into fists when he looked at her. It was only a matter of time. That night, after Jacob had woken up and eaten his supper in sullen silence before passing out in their bed, Caroline lay awake staring at the ceiling. She thought about her parents, about the life she had imagined for herself when she was a girl. She had wanted to see the mountains, to have children, to be loved by someone who cherished her. Instead, she had this, a failing farm, a husband who drowned his failures in whiskey, and a future that looked darker with every passing day. When the first light of dawn began to creep through the window, Caroline made her decision. Moving as quietly as she could, she gathered a few belongings, a change of clothes, her mother's Bible, a photograph of her family, and what little money she had managed to hide away over the years, barely $3. She took one of the jars of preserves from the cellar and a loaf of the bread she had baked yesterday. Then, her heart pounding so hard she thought Jacob would surely wake, she slipped out of the house and began walking west toward the creek. The prairie was cool in the pre-dawn light, the grass wet with dew that soaked through her boots. She had never been out alone at this hour, and the vastness of the landscape made her feel very small and very brave all at once. She kept expecting to hear Jacob's voice shouting after her, but there was only the sound of her own footsteps and the chirping of early birds. She found Cole's camp easily. He had built a small fire and was boiling coffee in a tin pot. His horse was grazing nearby, and he had already packed up his bedroll. When he saw her approaching, he stood, and she saw relief cross his face. "You came?" he said simply. "I came," Caroline confirmed, suddenly feeling foolish standing there with her pitiful bundle of belongings. "I do not know if this is the right decision, but I know staying would have been the wrong one." Cole nodded and handed her a tin cup of coffee. "That's all any of us can do, make the best choice we can with what we know." He gestured to his horse. "We should get moving. It's a long ride to Colorado, and I would like to put some distance between us and your farm before your husband wakes up and realizes you are gone." The reality of what she had done hit Caroline all at once. "He will come looking for me," she said, her voice shaking. "Jacob will not just let me go. I am his wife, his property, as far as the law is concerned." "Then we will make sure he does not find you," Cole said firmly. He poured out the rest of the coffee and kicked dirt over the fire. "I have a friend in town who owes me a favor. We will stop there first, and he can spread word that I rode south toward Texas. That should throw your husband off the trail if he comes asking questions." Caroline watched as he efficiently broke down the camp, and she felt a rush of gratitude so strong it brought tears to her eyes. This man, this stranger, was risking trouble for her sake, and she did not even know why. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You could have just ridden on yesterday. This is not your problem." Cole paused in tightening his saddle and turned to look at her. "My mother," he said quietly, "was married to a man like your husband, my father. He drank, and he was mean. And one winter he hit her so hard she did not wake up for 2 days. When she finally did, he was gone, run off somewhere, and it was just her and me. She raised me by herself, took in washing and mending to keep us fed. She taught me that you do not turn your back when someone needs help, especially when that someone is being hurt by a person who's supposed to love them." He turned back to the saddle. "And so that is why I am doing this. Because someone should have helped my mother, and no one did." Caroline swallowed hard, understanding now. "I am sorry about your mother. She's all right now. She lives in Denver with my sister, but she never forgot what it was like, and neither did I." He finished with the saddle and turned to her. "Now we have got a problem. I only have one horse, and she's not really built to carry 2 people all the way to Colorado. We're going to have to stop in Dodge and get you a mount. Do you ride?" "I can manage," Caroline said, though the truth was she had not been on a horse in years. Jacob had sold their riding horses long ago, keeping only the plow horses. "Good enough. Let's go." Cole helped her up onto the horse, then swung up behind her. It was strange being so close to a man who was not her husband, feeling his arms on either side of her as he held the reins. But it did not feel threatening. It felt safe, like she was being protected rather than controlled. They rode at a steady pace toward Dodge City, and as the sun rose higher, Caroline kept looking back over her shoulder, expecting to see Jacob riding after them with fury in his eyes, but the prairie remained empty behind them. They reached Dodge City by mid-morning. The town was bustling with activity, cowboys driving cattle, merchants opening their shops, and women in their best dresses walking along the wooden sidewalks. Cole took them to a livery stable on the edge of town, where a grizzled old man with one eye greeted him warmly. "Cole Morgan, you old dog. Thought you were headed back to Colorado." "I am, Sam, but I need a favor first. I need a gentle horse, something steady for a lady, and I need you to tell anyone who asks that I rode through here headed south yesterday. Can you do that?" Sam's one good eye flicked to Caroline, taking in her worn dress and the fear she was trying to hide. "That kind of favor, is it? Well, you helped me out when those rustlers were after my stock. I figure I owe you. I've got a mare out back, sweet-tempered thing, belonged to a widow who passed last month. Her son sold her to me cheap. I can let you have her for $20, and I will throw in a saddle and bridle." "Deal," Cole said, pulling out bills from his pocket. Caroline watched the transaction feeling both grateful and guilty. $20 was a lot of money, and he was spending it on her, a woman he had met less than a day ago, Sam brought out the mare, a pretty chestnut with kind eyes, and Cole spent some time adjusting the stirrups for Carolyn's height. "Think you can handle her?" he asked. Caroline approached the mare slowly, letting the horse sniff her hand before stroking her nose. "Hello, sweet girl," she murmured. "We are going to be friends, you and I." She turned to Cole. "What is her name?" "Widow said she was called Rosie," Sam supplied. "Rosie," Caroline repeated, feeling a smile tug at her lips for the first time, and she could not remember how long. "That is a good name." With Cole's help, she climbed into the saddle. It felt awkward at first, her muscles remembering a skill she had not used in years, but Rosie stood patiently while she found her seat. Cole mounted his own horse, a tall bay gelding, and nodded to Sam before leading the way out of town. They rode west, following the trail that would eventually take them to Colorado. Cole kept them to a steady but not exhausting pace, mindful that Caroline was not used to long days in the saddle. They stopped frequently to rest the horses and stretch their legs, and Cole shared food from his saddlebags, jerky, hardtack, and dried apples. As they rode, they talked. Caroline found herself telling Cole things she had never told anyone about her childhood in Missouri, about her dreams before her marriage, about the slow death of hope she had experienced over the past 4 years. Cole listened without judgment, occasionally asking questions, but mostly just letting her talk. In turn, he told her about his ranch in Colorado, about the mountains and the valleys where his cattle grazed, about the house he had built with his own hands. "It is not much," he said, as they rode through the afternoon. "2 rooms, a fireplace, a good well, but it is solid, and it is mine. I have got about 30 head of cattle right now, and I am hoping to build that up over the next few years. There is good grazing land, and the winters are hard but manageable." "It sounds wonderful," Caroline said honestly, "is having something that is truly yours. I cannot imagine what that must feel like." "You will find out," Cole said, and there was a promise in his voice that made her heart skip a beat. They made camp that night beside a small stream. Cole showed Caroline how to unsaddle Rosie and rub her down, how to hobble her so she would not wander off in the night. He built a fire and made a simple supper of beans and bacon, and they sat together watching the stars come out overhead. The prairie stretched endlessly around them, dark and mysterious, and Caroline felt simultaneously tiny and infinite, like she had stepped out of her old life into something vast and new. "Are you scared?" Cole asked after a long silence. Caroline considered the question. "Yes," she admitted, "but I am also free. Maybe for the first time in my adult life. That feels worth being scared for." Cole smiled, and in the firelight his face looked younger, more open. "You are braver than you think, Caroline. It takes courage to walk away from the known, even when the known is terrible." "Or maybe it just takes desperation," she said, but she was smiling too. "Maybe it takes both," Cole allowed. "But you are here, and that is what matters." That night, Caroline slept under the stars for the first time in her life, wrapped in a spare blanket Cole had given her. She lay awake for a long time, listening to the night sounds of the prairie and the steady breathing of Cole sleeping a respectful distance away. She thought about Jacob, wondered if he had woken yet to find her gone. Part of her felt guilty for leaving without a word, but a larger part felt only relief. She had spent 4 years trying to be the wife he wanted, and it had never been enough. Now she was choosing herself, and that felt like a radical act. They rode for 5 more days, moving steadily westward through Kansas and into Colorado territory. The landscape changed gradually, the flat prairie giving way to rolling hills and then to the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. Caroline had never seen mountains before, and when they first appeared on the horizon like purple shadows, she gasped aloud. "They are beautiful," she breathed. "Wait until you see them up close," Cole said, and there was pride in his voice, the pride of a man showing off his home. As they traveled, Caroline felt herself changing. The constant fear that had been her companion for 4 years began to ease, replaced by something that felt almost like hope. She and Cole fell into an easy companionship, talking and laughing as they rode, working together to make camp each night. She learned that he was 26, that he had served briefly as a cavalry scout before deciding he wanted a quieter life, that he loved the mountains with a passion that was almost spiritual. He learned that she could cook anything over an open fire, that she had a quick wit when she was not afraid, that she sang old hymns under her breath when she thought no one was listening. On the 6th day, they crossed into Colorado and began climbing into the mountains proper. The air grew cooler and thinner, scented with pine and earth. They followed a narrow trail that wound between towering evergreens, and Caroline felt like she had ridden into a fairy tale. The beauty of it all made her chest ache. "How much further?" she asked as they stopped to water the horses at a crystal-clear stream. "We will be there by nightfall," Cole said. "My property starts just over the next ridge." Caroline felt a flutter of nervousness. For the past week, she had been in a kind of limbo, neither here nor there, just existing in the journey. But now the journey was ending, and she would have to face the reality of her situation. She was a married woman who had run away from her husband. She had no legal right to be here, no claim to independence. If Jacob found her, the law would be on his side. And beyond all that, she was about to live on the property of a man she had known for less than 2 weeks. What would people say? What would Cole expect of her? As if reading her thoughts, Cole said, "Caroline, I want you to understand something. When we get to the ranch, you will have your own space. I have got a small room I have been using for storage, but we can clear it out and make it proper for you. You will work for your keep, sure, but you will be paid fairly, and you will be free to leave whenever you want. I am not your husband, and I am not your keeper. I am just someone who wants to help." Caroline felt tears prick her eyes at his kindness. "Why are you so good to me?" she asked, her voice thick. "You could have left me in that cellar. You could have ridden past and never looked back." Cole was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Maybe I'm just selfish. Maybe I've been alone too long and I wanted the company. Or maybe I saw something in your eyes that reminded me that there is still goodness worth fighting for in this world." He looked at her directly, his dark eyes serious. "Or maybe I just did not want to be the kind of man who rides past someone in trouble." They reached Cole's ranch as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The house was small but solidly built, nestled in a valley with a view of the mountains on 3 sides. There was a barn, a corral, and several outbuildings, all well maintained. As they rode up, Caroline could see cattle grazing in the distance and a few chickens pecking around the yard. "It is perfect," Caroline said, and she meant it. The place had an air of peace and permanence that the farm in Kansas had never possessed. Cole helped her down from Rosie and led both horses to the barn. "Let me get them settled, then I will show you the house," he said. While he tended to the animals, Caroline stood in the yard, slowly turning to take it all in. The mountains rose up around her like protective walls, and the air was so clean and cool it made her feel lighter. She could hear water running somewhere nearby, and the wind through the pines made a sound like distant singing. For the first time in 4 years, she felt like she could breathe. Cole emerged from the barn and led her inside the house. It was simple but comfortable, with a main room that served as kitchen and living space, a bedroom, and a smaller room that was indeed filled with tools and supplies. "We can move all this out to the barn," Cole said, surveying the cluttered space. "Get you a proper bed and some furniture. It will not be fancy, but it will be yours." "It is more than I had," Caroline said softly. "Thank you, Cole, for all of this. I do not know how I will ever repay you." "You do not have to repay me," Cole said. "Just be safe. That's enough." Over the next few weeks, they fell into a routine. Caroline took over the cooking and the household tasks, grateful to have something productive to do. She tended the chickens, gathered eggs, and started a garden near the house. Cole cleared out the storage room and built her a simple bed frame, and she made a mattress from ticking stuffed with pine needles and dried grass. It was rough compared to what she had been used to, but it was hers, and she slept better in it than she ever had in the bed she had shared with Jacob. Cole taught her how to manage the ranch, how to mend fences and care for the cattle. She proved to be a quick learner, and he came to rely on her judgment. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, sometimes talking, sometimes just enjoying the comfortable silence. Caroline found herself watching Cole when he was not looking, noticing the way his hands moved when he was working, the way he squinted into the distance when he was thinking, the rare but beautiful smile that transformed his serious face. She was falling in love with him, she realized one afternoon as she watched him repair a broken wagon wheel. The knowledge should have terrified her. She was still technically married, still legally bound to Jacob, but her heart did not seem to care about legalities. It only knew that Cole was kind and strong and good, that he made her feel valued and safe, that when he looked at her, she saw herself reflected as someone worthy of respect. One evening in late September, nearly 2 months after she had arrived at the ranch, they were sitting outside watching the stars when Cole said, "I need to go into town tomorrow. We are running low on supplies and I want to check if there's been any mail. Do you want to come with me?" Caroline hesitated. She had not been off the ranch since they had arrived, afraid of being seen, afraid that somehow word would get back to Jacob about where she was, but she was also tired of hiding. "Yes," she said, "I would like that." The town was called Silver Creek, a small settlement that served the scattered ranches and mines in the area. It was nothing like Dodge City, just a main street with a general store, a saloon, a church, and a few other buildings. Cole introduced her to the shopkeeper, a motherly woman named Mrs. Patterson, as his housekeeper, and if Mrs. Patterson thought there was anything unusual about the arrangement, she was too polite to say so. While Cole was arranging for supplies to be delivered, Caroline browsed the store, marveling at the bolts of fabric and the jars of candy. Mrs. Patterson came over to chat, and Caroline found herself relaxing under the older woman's friendly questions. It felt good to talk to another woman after so long. "You are doing wonders for that boy," Mrs. Patterson said, as she wrapped up a length of blue calico Caroline had admired. "Cole's a good man, but he's been alone too long. It is nice to see him with someone." Caroline felt her cheeks heat. "Oh, we are not. I just work for him." Mrs. Patterson gave her a knowing smile. "Of course, dear. But you mark my words, that young man looks at you like you hung the moon. And unless I miss my guess, you look at him the same way." Caroline did not know what to say to that, so she just smiled and took her package. But Mrs. Patterson's words stayed with her on the ride back to the ranch. Did Cole look at her that way? And if he did, what did it mean? What could it mean when she was still married to another man? That night after supper, Cole seemed restless. He kept starting to say something and then stopping, and finally Caroline put down her mending and said, "What is wrong? You have been acting strange all evening." Cole ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she had come to recognize as a sign of nervousness. "There was a man in town asking questions," he said finally. "Stranger, passing through. He was asking if anyone had seen a woman matching your description, traveling with a cowboy." Caroline felt her blood turn to ice. "Jacob," she whispered, "he's looking for me." "Maybe," Cole said, "or maybe he hired someone to look." Either way, the shopkeeper did not say anything, and neither did anyone else I talked to. "But Caroline, we need to talk about this. We need to talk about your situation." "What situation?" Caroline said, though she knew exactly what he meant. "You are still married," Cole said gently. "In the eyes of the law, you are Jacob's wife, and he has every right to demand you come back. If he finds you here, I could be charged with abduction or worse, and you would have no choice but to go back with him." "No," Caroline said fiercely. "I will not go back. I would rather die than go back to that life." "I know," Cole said, "and I will not let him take you, but we need to figure out a way to make sure he cannot. The only way to do that is to end your marriage legally." "How?" Caroline asked. "I do not have grounds for divorce. He never hit me, never did the things that the law recognizes as cruelty." Cole was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "There might be another way. If Jacob could be convinced to grant you a divorce voluntarily, or if he could be made to disappear." "Disappear?" Caroline looked at him sharply. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Cole said carefully, "that if Jacob were to decide his pride was worth less than, say, a sum of money, he might be willing to sign papers saying he was divorcing you." Men like him care more about whiskey and cards than they do about anything else. If someone were to offer him enough money to keep him drunk for a year, he might take it. You would do that? Caroline asked, stunned. You would pay my husband to divorce me? I would do whatever it takes to make sure you're free, Cole said. And there was something in his voice that made Caroline's heart race. Because, Caroline, I need to tell you something. I need to tell you that these past 2 months have been the best of my life. Having you here, working beside you, talking with you, watching you bloom like a flower that has finally gotten enough sun, it has made me realize something. I am in love with you. I have been falling in love with you since the moment I saw you climb out of that root cellar with dirt on your face and fire in your eyes. And I know it is too soon, and I know you might not feel the same way, but I need you to know that I will do anything, pay anything, risk anything to make sure you are safe and free. Caroline stared at him, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Cole, she whispered, I love you too. I think I have loved you since you offered me coffee that first morning, since you gave me a choice when I had not had one in so long. But I am married, and even if I were not, I have nothing to offer you. No money, no property, nothing but myself, and I am broken, Cole. Jacob broke something in me, and I do not know if it can be fixed. Cole crossed the room in 3 strides and took her hands in his. You are not broken, he said fiercely. You are bent, maybe, but not broken. And even if you were, I would love you anyway. I would love you in pieces. I would spend the rest of my life helping you put yourself back together if that is what it took. Caroline felt tears streaming down her face, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of joy, of a hope so bright it almost hurt. What do we do? She asked. How do we make this work? We start by making you legally free, Cole said. I will write to a friend of mine, a lawyer in Denver. He can help us figure out the best way to approach this. If it means paying Jacob off, then that is what we will do. If it means filing for divorce on grounds of abandonment or cruelty, we will do that, whatever it takes. That could take months, Caroline said, or years. Then we will wait, Cole said simply. I have waited this long to find someone like you. I can wait a bit longer to make it right. But Caroline was tired of waiting, tired of letting fear and propriety dictate her life. She reached up and touched Cole's face, feeling the rough stubble on his jaw, the warmth of his skin. Cole Morgan, she said softly, I do not want to wait to live. I have spent 4 years in a marriage that was legal but dead. I would rather spend whatever time we have in a love that is true, even if it is not legal yet. Cole's eyes darkened, and he leaned down to kiss her, gently at first and then with growing passion. Caroline kissed him back, feeling like she was coming alive after years of being numb. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. Are you sure? He asked. I do not want you to regret this. I have never been more sure of anything, Caroline said. I love you, and I want to build a life with you, whatever that looks like. That night, they slept in each other's arms for the first time, and Caroline felt truly safe for the first time in years. In the morning, she woke to find Cole watching her with a soft smile on his face. Good morning, he said. Good morning, she replied, smiling back. This is real, is it not? I have not dreamed it. It is real, Cole assured her. More real than anything I have ever known. Over the next few weeks, they lived in a kind of golden bubble, working together during the day and holding each other at night. Cole wrote to his lawyer friend, explaining the situation and asking for advice. The response came back 6 weeks later, brought by a writer from town. The lawyer said that Colorado had more progressive divorce laws than many states, and that if Caroline could prove she had been abandoned or mistreated, she might be able to obtain a divorce without Jacob's consent. It would require her to establish residency in Colorado for a period of time, which she had already done, and to provide testimony about her marriage. There is another option, the lawyer's letter continued. If the husband could be located and convinced to agree to a mutual divorce, the process would be much faster. However, given the circumstances you have described, I would not recommend attempting to contact him directly. If you wish, I can send an agent to locate him and make an offer on your behalf." Cole and Caroline discussed it at length and decided to take the lawyer's suggestion. They would offer Jacob money in exchange for a quick, quiet divorce. It was not ideal, but it was practical. Cole wrote back with their decision, and the lawyer promised to handle everything. Winter came to the mountains, bringing snow and cold winds. Caroline had never experienced a winter like this, where the snow piled up to the windows and the cold was so intense it hurt to breathe. But she was not afraid. The house was warm. The pantry was full of the food she had preserved, and Cole was beside her. They spent long evenings by the fire, reading aloud to each other from the few books Cole owned, or just talking about their dreams for the future. "I want children," Caroline said one night. "I always wanted children. But with Jacob, I was grateful I never got pregnant. I could not bear the thought of bringing a child into that life. But with you, I want it. I want to fill this house with the sound of little feet and laughter." "I want that too," Cole said, pulling her closer. "A whole brood of them running wild through these mountains, tough and free and loved." "How many is a brood?" Carolyn teased. "Oh, at least 5 or 6, Cole said with a grin. Carolyn laughed. "Let us start with one and see how we manage." The letter came in early March, just as the snow was beginning to melt. The lawyer had located Jacob in Dodge City, still on the farm, still drinking. When presented with an offer of $200 in exchange for signing divorce papers, Jacob had agreed readily. The papers had been filed, and the divorce would be final in 60 days. 60 days, Caroline said, staring at the letter. "In 60 days, I will be free." "You have been free since the day you climbed out of that root cellar," Cole reminded her. "This is just making it official." Those 60 days felt both endless and far too short. Caroline found herself in a state of anxious anticipation, afraid to believe that it was really happening, that she was really going to be free to marry Cole and start the life they had been dreaming about. But the days passed one by one, and then the letter came from the lawyer confirming that the divorce was final. Caroline was no longer Mrs. Jacob Hartley. She was simply Caroline, free to choose her own path. Cole proposed to her that very night, going down on one knee in their small living room with a simple gold band he had bought months ago in anticipation of this moment. "Caroline," he said, "will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my love for the rest of our lives?" "Yes," Caroline said through happy tears. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married 2 weeks later in the little church in Silver Creek, with Mrs. Patterson and her husband standing as witnesses. Caroline wore a dress she had sewn herself from the blue calico Mrs. Patterson had helped her pick out, and Cole wore his best shirt and a new vest. It was a simple ceremony, but to Caroline it was more beautiful and meaningful than any grand wedding could have been. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife and Cole kissed her, she felt like her heart might burst from joy. They honeymooned at the ranch, spending a week largely ignoring the chores and focusing entirely on each other. It was a revelation to Caroline, learning what it meant to be with a man who loved her, who cared about her pleasure and her happiness. The intimacy she shared with Cole was nothing like the cold, perfunctory encounters she had endured with Jacob. This was warmth and passion and tenderness all mixed together, and she felt herself healing in ways she had not known she needed. As spring turned to summer, they worked together to expand the ranch. Cole hired a few ranch hands to help with the cattle, and Caroline started selling eggs and butter in town. They were building something together, a life that was solid and good. And then, in late August, exactly 1 year after Cole had found her hiding in that root cellar, Caroline realized she was pregnant. She told Cole one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "I am going to have a baby," she said simply. Cole's face went through a series of expressions: shock, disbelief, and then pure, radiant joy. "A baby," he said. His voice choked. "We are going to have a baby?" "We are," Caroline confirmed, laughing at his reaction. Cole let out a whoop of joy and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing. "We are going to be parents," he said, setting her down gently. "You are going to be a mother. I am going to be a father. This is really happening." "It is really happening," Caroline agreed, feeling a sense of peace and rightness settle over her. This was what she had been meant for, this life, this love, this future. Their son was born in April of 1880 during a late spring snowstorm. Cole rode through the blizzard to fetch the midwife from town, and Caroline labored through the night with the wind howling outside. When the baby finally arrived, red-faced and wailing, Cole was there holding her hand, tears streaming down his face. "It is a boy," the midwife announced, placing the baby in Caroline's arms. "A healthy, strong boy." Caroline looked down at her son, at his tiny fingers and his shock of dark hair, and felt a love so fierce it was almost frightening. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We have been waiting for you." They named him Thomas, after Cole's father, who had died when Cole was young, and he was indeed strong and healthy. He grew quickly, filling the house with his cries and gurgles, and eventually his laughter. Cole proved to be a devoted father, patient and playful, and Caroline sometimes found herself just watching the two of them together, marveling at the life they had built. 2 years later, they had a daughter, whom they named Sarah. She had Caroline's blonde hair and Cole's dark eyes, and she was as fierce and independent as her mother. 3 years after that came another boy, James, who was quieter and more thoughtful than his siblings. They never did get to the 5 or 6 children Cole had joked about, but 3 felt perfect, felt like their family was complete. The ranch prospered over the years. Cole expanded the herd and bought more land, and Caroline's garden grew until she was selling produce to half the town. They hired more help, including a young cowboy named Ben, who reminded Caroline a bit of Cole when she had first met him. Quiet, hard-working, and kind. The children grew strong and wild, running through the mountains just as Cole had imagined, and the house was indeed filled with the sound of laughter and little feet. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Cole took Caroline up to a high meadow on the property, a place where wildflowers bloomed in profusion and you could see for miles in every direction. They sat together on a blanket, watching their children play in the distance, and Cole said, "Do you ever regret it? Leaving Kansas, taking such a risk on a stranger?" Caroline thought about it seriously, as she always did when Cole asked her important questions. "No," she said finally. "I regret the years I wasted being afraid, the time I spent hiding in that cellar instead of fighting for myself. But I do not regret leaving, and I certainly do not regret you. You gave me my life back, Cole. You gave me freedom and love and a family. You gave me everything that matters." "You gave me those things too," Cole said softly. "I was just existing before you came along, going through the motions. You made me want to build something, to create a legacy. You made me want to be better than I was." Caroline leaned her head on his shoulder, watching as Thomas tried to teach Sarah how to skip stones in the creek while James picked wildflowers nearby. "We built something pretty wonderful." "Did we not?" she said. "We did," Cole agreed, "and we are not done yet. We have got years ahead of us, years to keep building and growing and loving." He was right. They had decades ahead of them. Decades of hard work and simple joys, of challenges faced together and triumphs celebrated. The ranch became one of the most successful in the region, and the Morgan family became known for their integrity and kindness. Caroline never forgot where she had come from. The fear and desperation that had driven her to hide in that root cellar, and she made it a point to help other women who found themselves in similar situations, offering them work or sanctuary when they needed it. Jacob died in 1892. They learned from a letter that found its way to them. He had drunk himself to death in Dodge City, alone and unmourned. Caroline felt nothing when she heard the news, no satisfaction, no sadness, just a sense of closure. That part of her life was truly over, as definitively as if it had happened to someone else. As they grew older, Caroline and Cole's love deepened and matured, becoming less about passion and more about partnership, companionship, and a bone-deep understanding of each other. They were two people who had found each other against all odds and had built something lasting. Thomas grew up to be a rancher like his father, taking over the day-to-day operations when Cole's back started giving him trouble. Sarah married a lawyer from Denver and moved to the city, where she became involved in the suffrage movement, fighting for women's rights with the same fierce determination her mother had shown in choosing her own freedom. James became a teacher, opening a school in Silver Creek and dedicating himself to educating the children of the mountains. Caroline and Cole became grandparents and then great-grandparents, their house filled with the noise and chaos of visiting family. Cole built extra rooms onto the house to accommodate everyone, and Caroline presided over Sunday dinners that sometimes seated 20 people or more. They were rich in family, if not always in money, and that seemed far more valuable. On a summer evening in 1915, Caroline and Cole sat on the porch of their house, now grown to twice its original size, watching the sun set over the mountains. They were both in their 60s now, slowed by age, but still sharp in mind and warm in heart. Cole held Caroline's hand, his thumb tracing the same pattern it had traced thousands of times over the decades. "Do you remember the day we met?" Caroline asked. "When you found me in that root cellar?" "Every detail," Cole said. "You were wearing a blue dress and you had dirt on your cheek, and you looked at me like you were not sure if I was real or not." "I was not sure," Caroline admitted. "You seemed too good to be true. You still do sometimes." Cole smiled and raised her hand to his lips. "I was just a cowboy riding past who heard someone in trouble. You did all the hard work, Caroline. You chose freedom. You chose love. You chose life." "We chose each other," Caroline corrected, "and we kept choosing each other every day for all these years." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to purple. In the distance, they could hear their grandchildren playing, and from inside the house came the sound of their daughter-in-law singing as she prepared supper. It was an ordinary evening, unremarkable in many ways, but to Caroline it was perfect. She thought about that frightened woman hiding in a root cellar all those years ago, and she wished she could go back and tell her that everything was going to be all right, that the cowboy who found her was going to change her life in ways she could not imagine, that she was going to find more happiness than she ever dreamed possible. But maybe that woman had known somewhere deep down. Maybe when she had taken Cole's hand and climbed out into the sunlight, she had felt the first stirring of hope, the first glimmer of the life that was waiting for her. Maybe that was why she had been brave enough to leave, brave enough to choose the unknown over the familiar horror. "Thank you," Caroline said suddenly. Cole looked at her. "For what?" "For seeing me," Caroline said. "For stopping when you could have ridden past. For giving me a choice when I thought I had none. For loving me when I did not think I was worth loving. For building this life with me." Cole was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "Thank you for being brave enough to climb out of that cellar. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for every day we have had together, and for giving me a family and a purpose and a love that has made every moment worth living." They kissed then, a soft, gentle kiss that held 37 years of love and partnership and devotion. And as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Caroline reflected that she had indeed found her happily ever after. Not because life had been perfect, it had not, but because she had found someone who made even the imperfect parts worth experiencing. Years later, when both Cole and Caroline had passed peacefully into old age, their children would tell the story of how they met to their own children and grandchildren. They would talk about the cowboy who stopped to help a woman in need, and the brave woman who chose freedom over fear. They would talk about the ranch in the mountains and the family that grew from one simple act of kindness and courage. And they would always end the story the same way, that sometimes the person who saves you is also the person you were meant to find. And that true love is not just about passion or romance, but about choosing each other over and over again through all the ordinary days and extraordinary moments that make up a life well lived together. The root cellar where it all began was eventually filled in and forgotten, but the legacy of what happened there, of the choice Caroline made and the love she found, lived on through generations, a testament to the power of courage, compassion, and the remarkable things that can happen when one person decides to help another.